The chandelier above the Manhattan penthouse threw amber light across crystal, silk, and silence as Isabella Sinclair stood frozen with a wine bottle in her hand. Her husband, Roman Callahan, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast, leaned back beside another woman in a black silk dress and gave his wife an order in front of his entire empire. "Refill her glass." 12 people watched. Nobody breathed. Nobody defended her. And in that single humiliating heartbeat, Isabella made a decision that would burn his world to ash. If you want to see how she destroyed him, hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. The night Roman Callahan introduced his mistress to his wife, the city beneath the penthouse was wet with November rain, and the windows of the dining room held two reflections of Isabella Sinclair, one in the glass, calm and composed, and one inside her chest, screaming. She had been awake since 5 that morning. She had personally arranged the seating. She had chosen the wine. She had walked the florist through the centerpieces over the phone while standing barefoot on the cold marble of the master bathroom, holding a coffee that had gone lukewarm 2 hours earlier. She had done all of this because Roman had told her 3 weeks ago that this dinner mattered, that his future depended on the people sitting at this table, that she needed to show up like a wife for once. She had shown up. She had worn the navy dress he liked, the one that made her shoulders look fragile. She had clipped back her dark hair the way his mother preferred. She had even smiled, which lately felt like lifting a piano with her face. What she had not expected was Vanessa Beaumont walking through her front door at 6:45 in the evening wearing a black silk dress and the smile of a woman who had been promised a seat. Vanessa stepped out of the private elevator the way a snake steps out of grass. She was tall, blonde, and laminated in confidence, with a clutch that probably cost more than the doorman made in a year. She didn't look at Isabella. She looked through her, the way people look through a coat check girl. "Roman," Vanessa said, and her voice was honey poured into a glass that already had whiskey in it. "Tell me I'm not late." Roman came down the hallway in shirt sleeves with his collar open and the smell of his cologne preceding him by a full second. He didn't look at his wife either. "You're not late," he said. He kissed Vanessa's cheek with no urgency, the way husbands kiss wives, the way owners touch property. Then he turned finally, and the look he gave Isabella was the look you'd give a server who'd brought the wrong fork. "Babe, she'll stay for dinner. Don't start." Isabella didn't move. She had been holding a small linen napkin in her left hand, and her grip on it tightened until her knuckles paled. "Start what?" she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was flat in a way she didn't recognize. Roman exhaled through his nose, already bored. "Don't. Just don't. The Halverson guy is going to be here in 10 minutes. I need this to look right. Look right." "You heard me." Vanessa drifted past them both into the living room as if she'd been there 1,000 times before. She probably had. Isabella's stomach turned over slowly, the way a body turns over in deep water before it sinks. There was a perfume on Vanessa that Isabella had smelled 3 weeks earlier on Roman's overcoat when she had gone to hang it up. She had told herself it was the dry cleaner. She had told herself a lot of things. Roman closed the gap between them. He put one large hand on the side of Isabella's face. His thumb stroked her cheekbone the way a man strokes a horse before he sells it. "Hey," he said softly, "look at me." She looked at him. "You're my wife," he said. "Okay. That doesn't change. But tonight I need you to be calm. I need you to be classy, like you usually are. Yeah?" He smiled. The smile had once made her stupid. Now it made her cold. "Yeah," she said. He patted her cheek, twice, lightly. The second pat was a degree too hard. Then he walked away from her, calling over his shoulder, "Pour the Brunello, let it breathe." She stood in the hallway with the linen napkin balled in her fist. She could hear Vanessa laughing in the next room. She could hear the elevator chiming, bringing up the next guest. She could feel her pulse in her teeth. She walked into the kitchen, the Sinclair kitchen. Roman called it that sometimes, as a joke, because she had paid for the renovation out of an account he didn't know existed, was lit from above by warm pendant lights. The marble island ran the length of the room. The wine was already open on the counter, 3 bottles standing like soldiers. She put her hands on the cold stone and breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, the way her grandfather had taught her to breathe when she was 9 years old and a school bully had broken her favorite pen on purpose. Real power never announces itself, William Sinclair had said. It waits quietly until everyone underestimates it. She breathed, she breathed, she breathed. Then she walked back out and poured the Brunello. The first guest off the elevator was Roman's mother, Constance Callahan, a woman built like a closed door. Constance wore black, always black, and pearls the size of grapes. She had not liked Isabella the day they met, and had not changed her mind in 3 years of marriage. She kissed the air beside Isabella's left ear and said, "You look tired." "Thank you for coming, Constance," Isabella said. "You should rest more. A husband notices." "I'll make a note." Constance smiled with no part of her face except the teeth and moved on. Then came Roman's younger brothers. Dominic first, tall and thick-necked, the dumb one, who at least had the decency to look embarrassed when he saw Vanessa already on the sofa. He hugged Isabella too hard, the way guilty men hug. "Bella." "Hey, you good?" "I'm great, Dom." "You sure?" "Pour yourself a drink, Dom." Then Marco, the younger one, leaner, sharper, who didn't hug her at all, just nodded and walked past her to clap Roman on the shoulder. Marco had always sided with Roman. Marco would side with Roman if Roman set the building on fire. Then the two captains, Lou Petrosino and a man everybody called Styx, for reasons no one had explained to her, both in dark suits, both with the slightly damp eyes of men who drank for a living. They bowed their heads at her the way men in that life bowed their heads at wives, with a polite professional distance. Lou took her hand and held it half a second longer than he should have. "Mrs. Callahan, always a pleasure." "Lou, smells incredible in here." "Thank you." He looked at her face. He saw something in it. He looked away. Then the investor. The whole reason for the dinner. Edmund Halverson III, Wall Street, old Greenwich money. Here because Roman wanted his name and his capital on a new development project in Long Island City. Halverson was tall and bald and wore a tie clip in the shape of a small gold bar, which Isabella had always found vulgar in a way she couldn't have explained at 22 and could explain perfectly now at 31. He came in with a wife who looked drugged, and he shook Isabella's hand and said, "Mrs. Callahan, your home is exquisite," and his eyes were already wandering toward Vanessa. Everybody's eyes wandered toward Vanessa. Isabella seated them. She seated Roman at the head. She seated Halverson at Roman's right. She seated Vanessa, and this was the part where her hand had shaken 2 hours ago when she had written out the place cards, at Roman's left. She seated herself at the foot of the table, 11 feet from her own husband. The candles she had bought were the tall ivory kind, and they burned without flickering. The first course came out. Endive salad, walnut, a little blue cheese. Roman ate with one hand and gestured with the other. He had always talked with his hands. "So Ed," he said, "you saw the schematics." "I did." "And?" "I think the location's interesting. I think the partner structure needs work." "We can talk partner structure." Yeah, we can talk." Vanessa leaned forward over her salad and laughed at nothing. Her hand drifted to Roman's forearm. Constance Callahan watched this with no expression and ate her endive in tiny bites. Isabella drank water. She did not touch the wine. She was watching the room the way her grandfather had taught her to watch a room. Not the faces, but the spaces between them. The captains were tense. Dominic kept looking at his plate. Marco was enjoying himself. Halverson was deciding something. Constance was waiting for something. And Vanessa was performing. The second course came, the veal. Isabella had spent an hour on the sauce that morning, reducing the stock the way her grandfather's housekeeper had shown her when she was 12 years old. She had made it perfectly. Nobody said anything about it. Then Roman said, "Bella, the wine." She looked up. "What?" "The wine. Vanessa's empty." The candles burned. The walnut on her plate looked very small. The 11 feet between them looked like the length of a runway. "Roman," she said quietly. "Yeah, you'd like me to refill her glass." He did not blink. He had not learned in 3 years of marriage that when she said his name softly like that, like a knife being unfolded, she was a step away from leaving a room and never coming back. He did not know this because he had never paid attention. Yeah, he said. Refill her glass. 12 people watched. Lou Petrosino set his fork down very carefully on the rim of his plate. Styx looked at the floor. Dominic's face went red. Marco smiled. Constance lifted her water glass to her mouth and didn't drink from it. Halverson's wife stared at her napkin. Halverson. And this was the moment Isabella would remember later, this exact moment. Looked at Roman with the smallest possible frown. Not disgust. Not yet. Just the recalibration of a man who is starting to wonder if the partner across the table has worse judgment than he was told. Vanessa held her empty glass up by the stem. She didn't even look at Isabella. She looked at the chandelier. Isabella stood up. The chair made no sound on the rug. She walked the length of the dining table, 11 feet that felt like a mile, and she picked up the bottle of Brunello from the silver coaster, and she felt the eyes of every person at that table on her body, and her face did not move. She poured Vanessa's wine, slowly, steadily, to the correct line on the glass, not a drop over, the way she had been taught to pour wine when she was 16 years old at a luncheon her grandfather had thrown for the Italian ambassador. Thank you, sweetie, Vanessa said. Isabella did not answer. She set the bottle down. She turned. She walked with the same unhurried pace into the kitchen. She heard behind her Roman launching back into his pitch to Halverson as if nothing had happened, as if the whole room had not just watched him hold his wife's head underwater in front of his mother. In the kitchen, she did not cry. She set the bottle on the counter. She placed both palms flat on the marble. She looked at her own reflection in the dark window above the sink. The woman in the glass had a small, even smile on her mouth that Isabella herself didn't remember putting there. She took her phone out of the small pocket sewn into the seam of her dress. She scrolled to a contact that had no name, only a single letter, C. She pressed call. It rang once. A man's voice answered, cool, dry, exact, like the click of a metal latch. Isabella. Charles. Yes. Bring everything. A pause. Not a hesitation. Charles Whitaker had never hesitated about anything in his life. Just the half-second of a man absorbing the shape of a decision he had been waiting 15 years to receive. How long do you need, he said. How fast can you be here? I can be in your lobby in 26 minutes. The attorneys are in Midtown. They can be there at 8:32. Then be here at 8:32. Isabella. Yes. Are you certain? She looked at the window again. The reflection had not stopped smiling. I have never been more certain of anything, she said. Then I'm coming. She ended the call. She put the phone back in the pocket of her dress. She picked up a second bottle of Brunello. They would need it, she knew, because Roman drank when he was pitching. And she walked back into the dining room. The conversation had picked back up. Roman was laughing at something Halverson had said. Vanessa had a hand on Roman's thigh, and she was not bothering to hide it. Constance was watching her son the way a sculptor watches a piece of marble crack along an invisible fault line. Lou Petrosino looked up as Isabella came back in, and their eyes met for half a second. And what passed between them was not romance. Lou was 62 years old and married to a kind woman in Bay Ridge, but the silent professional acknowledgement of one operator clocking another. Lou had been a soldier for 30 years. He recognized the face of a person who had just made a phone call that mattered. He blinked once, slowly. He didn't look away. Isabella set the second bottle on the table. She returned to her chair at the foot. She picked up her fork. She ate 3 bites of veal that she did not taste. Roman said, Bella, you all right? You're quiet. I'm fine, Roman. Yeah? I'm fine. He smiled. The smile was for the room, not for her. She gets quiet when she's tired, always has. Vanessa laughed. It was a small laugh, a private laugh, the kind of laugh that exists only between two people who have laughed in bed together. Halverson's wife stared deeper into her napkin. The third course came. Risotto. The risotto was perfect. Nobody said it was perfect. The conversation moved into numbers, into square footage, into zoning, into the language Roman spoke best, the language of leverage and rooms, and the long quiet pressure of money on a city's skin. Isabella listened. She had always listened. Roman had never noticed that she listened because he had never asked what she did with the information. At 8:21, Constance Callahan put her napkin on the table and said, "Roman, a word, in the hallway." Roman frowned. "Ma, we're eating." "A word." He sighed loudly, theatrically, for the benefit of his investors and his soldiers and his mistress and his brothers. He pushed back his chair. "Excuse me a sec." Constance stood. She did not look at Isabella as she passed her. She did not have to. Isabella watched her mother-in-law move down the hallway with the unhurried weight of an old woman who had buried 2 husbands and outlived 4 enemies, and she understood in that moment that Constance had seen what Lou had seen. Constance had recognized something. The old woman had felt, in her gut, the shift in the room that her son was too drunk on himself to feel. It didn't matter. It was too late. Roman and his mother were gone from the dining room for 3 minutes. During those 3 minutes, Vanessa drained her wine. Halverson asked Marco about the union situation in Queens. Dominic stared at his plate. Lou Petrosino watched Isabella with a face that had become very still. Roman came back to the table laughing, but the laugh was thin at the edges. Constance returned behind him and sat without speaking. She did not eat anything else. At 8:29, the doorman buzzed up. Roman frowned. "Who the hell is that?" "It's for me," Isabella said. Every head at the table turned. "For you?" Roman said. "Bella, we're in the middle of dinner." "I know." "Who is it?" "My accountant." He laughed. He actually laughed. The laugh was sharp and surprised, and a little ugly. "Your accountant, at 8:30 at night." "Yes." "On a Friday." "Yes." He shook his head, smiling at Halverson, palms up. "Women, am I right?" Halverson did not smile back. Halverson was now watching Isabella with the same expression he had used 3 hours earlier when Roman had handed him the schematics for the Long Island City project. The expression of a man reading a document. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open in the foyer. 3 men walked out. The first was tall and thin and very pale, with white hair cut short and a charcoal overcoat over a gray suit. He moved without hurry. The 2 younger men behind him carried matte black leather document cases, the kind that locked at the side. The younger men were lawyers. Anyone in that room with a working set of eyes could have identified them as lawyers from 40 feet away. The older man came into the dining room and stopped at the threshold. He removed his overcoat. He folded it, once, over his left forearm. He looked at Isabella, and he inclined his head half an inch. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said. Not Mrs. Callahan. Mrs. Sinclair. Roman's face changed. He'd heard the difference. Some part of him, the animal part of him, had heard the difference. He set down his fork. "Who the hell are you?" he said. "My name is Charles Whitaker," the older man said. "I'm the senior legal and financial advisor to the Sinclair estate. I've been so for 31 years. I'm here at the request of Mrs. Sinclair." "Mrs. Callahan." "Mrs. Sinclair." Roman's nostrils flared. He looked at Isabella. He looked at Vanessa. He looked back at Charles. The look in his eyes was the look of a man who had been driving on a road for 3 years and had just realized he didn't know what country he was in. "Bella," he said low. "What the hell is this?" She set down her napkin. She stood up from the foot of the table. The candles still did not flicker. "Charles," she said, please, take the table." The 2 lawyers stepped forward in perfect synchronization. One of them set his case onto the dining table with a soft, expensive click and unlatched the side. The other did the same on the opposite end. Vanessa's wine glass was sitting 4 inches from the case at her elbow. She moved it, slowly, like a woman pulling her hand away from a hot stove. Charles Whitaker reached into the first case. He produced a single folder, black, embossed in the lower right corner with 2 letters in dull silver, SB. He placed it on the table in front of Edmund Halverson III. "Mr. Halverson," Charles said, "forgive the intrusion. I understand you've been in discussions tonight regarding a development project in Long Island City." Halverson's mouth opened, very slightly. "How do you—" "My principal would prefer that you have full information before you continue those discussions. Inside this folder, you will find the current ownership structure of the parcel in question. I would draw your attention to the 3rd page, where you will find the holding company. I would draw your attention to the 7th page, where you will find the trust that owns the holding company. I would draw your attention to the 9th page, where you will find the sole beneficiary of that trust. Halverson opened the folder. He read the 3rd page. He read the 7th page. He read the 9th page. Then he looked up. He looked at Roman, then he looked at Isabella, at the foot of the table, in the navy dress, with her hair clipped back the way her mother-in-law preferred. His face did something Isabella had not seen on the face of a man in a very long time. It went pale. Mrs. Halverson started and then stopped because he didn't know what to call her anymore. Roman shot to his feet so fast his chair tipped and slammed into the rug behind him. "What is in that folder?" he said. Nobody answered him. What is in that folder? Charles Whitaker did not turn his head. He continued to address Halverson in the same dry, exact tone. "Mr. Halverson, I'd also like to direct your attention to the second case." The second lawyer unlatched it. Inside, you will find a list of 41 additional commercial properties in the 5 boroughs in which Mr. Callahan has, over the past 4 years, sought partnership financing. Each of these properties is, at the ground level, owned by an entity that resolves, through a chain of trusts, to the same beneficiary. The same beneficiary, Mr. Halverson, who has been sitting at the foot of this table all evening pouring your wine. Vanessa Beaumont made a small, involuntary sound in her throat. It was not a word. Constance Callahan closed her eyes. Roman said, "Bella." Isabella looked at him. His face had broken open. She had never seen his face look like this. Not on their wedding day, not on the day his father died, not on the night 2 years ago when a man named Tony Bracco had been found in the trunk of a car in Red Hook, and Roman had come home at 4 in the morning, shaking. She had seen Roman afraid before, but only of other men. She had never, until this moment, seen Roman afraid of her. "Bella," he said again, whatever this is, we talk about it, you and me, in the back, right now." "No," she said. "Bella." "No, Roman. Don't do this in front of—" He gestured wildly, the hand he talked with, the hand that had stroked her face an hour ago and patted her cheek twice. "Don't do this in front of him. Don't do this in front of—" "In front of who, Roman? In front of—" He stopped. His mouth worked. He couldn't finish the sentence because the only honest end to the sentence was in front of Vanessa, and even he, even now, even with the floor falling out from under his life, understood that this was not a sentence he could say out loud. Charles Whitaker reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He produced a single sheet of paper, folded once. He held it out, across the table, to Isabella. She walked the length of the dining table for the second time that night. 11 feet. The same 11 feet. The candles still did not flicker. She took the paper from Charles's hand. She unfolded it. She read it. It was 1 line of text and 1 number. The number had a great many zeros after it. She refolded the paper. She handed it back to Charles. She turned slowly in her own dining room, and she looked at her husband, at Roman Callahan, the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast, who had ordered her to refill another woman's wine in front of his mother and his soldiers and his investor. And she spoke for the first time all evening, in her real voice. "Roman," she said, "sit down." He did not sit down. "So, sit down, Roman." "Bella, sit down." He sat. He sat the way a much younger man sits when an older man tells him to. The room was so quiet, Isabella could hear the elevator humming 3 walls away. She could hear Dominic Callahan breathing through his open mouth. She could hear, very faintly, the rain still tapping the window glass that overlooked the Hudson. She walked back to her chair at the foot of the table. She did not sit. She placed both her hands, flat, on the back of the chair. The candles, finally flickered. A small wind from the open foyer, perhaps, or the breath of every person in the room releasing at the same time. And the gold light moved across her face and her collarbones, and the small navy dress that Roman had once said made her shoulders look fragile. "Charles," she said. "Yes." "Read it." Charles Whitaker, this man who had managed the Sinclair Empire in silence for 31 years, the man who had buried 2 of her grandfather's enemies in court without ever raising his voice, the man whose name did not appear on any masthead of any company anywhere in the world, but who could, with a single phone call, freeze a pension fund in Connecticut, opened the first folder. He cleared his throat very gently, the way a surgeon clears a throat before a long operation. He began to read aloud. And as the first sentence left his mouth, Sinclair Blackwood Holdings, parent entity, founded 1968, current consolidated net asset value as of the close of business today, Roman Callahan's phone, sitting face up next to his whiskey glass, lit up. The name on the screen was a name Isabella had seen exactly twice before, both times at 3 in the morning, both times in months when Roman had come home from the docks with cuts on his knuckles he wouldn't explain. The name was Federal, and below it, a preview of the message in the gray text the phone showed before you unlocked it. We need to meet tonight. They've moved up the date. Roman saw it. Isabella saw him see it. And across the table, Edmund Halverson III, Wall Street, Old Greenwich money, tie clip in the shape of a small gold bar, saw it too. The candles flickered again. Charles Whitaker kept reading. Charles Whitaker kept reading, and the words came out of his mouth in the calm, careful order of a man laying bricks. Asset value. Consolidated holdings. Real estate parcels in 7 states. Equity positions in 3 private banks. Controlling interest in a shipping concern out of Baltimore. He read like a man who had rehearsed this aloud in the bathroom mirror on the off chance he would ever get to say it. Nobody at the table moved. Roman's phone was still face up, still glowing, still showing the gray preview of a message he had not yet opened. We need to meet tonight. They've moved up the date. His hand sat next to it like a hand that had forgotten what it was for. Halverson was the first to speak. He cleared his throat. He pushed his chair back 2 inches. He did not stand. Mr. Callahan, Halverson said very quietly. Roman didn't look at him. Mr. Callahan, I'm going to need a moment. Roman didn't look at him. Mr. Callahan. What? My wife and I are going to step into the foyer. Roman's head moved finally. The motion was slow and bad, like a fighter turning his head to a punch he didn't see coming. Ed, don't do that. Just a moment. Ed, look at me. Look at me. This is a misunderstanding. This is between her and me. Sit down. Eat the risotto. The risotto's lovely, Halverson said. It was the cruelest thing anyone had said all night. He didn't say it cruelly. He said it the way a polite man says thank you for having me before walking out of a house he is never coming back to. He stood. He held out his hand to his wife. His wife, who all evening had stared into her napkin like a woman receiving a private transmission, stood with him, and her napkin fell from her lap onto the rug, and nobody bent to pick it up. The Halversons walked in step out of the dining room and into the foyer. They did not go all the way to the elevator. They stopped at the credenza where Isabella kept the spare keys in a small Murano dish. Halverson took out his phone. He turned his back to the dining room. He spoke quietly to someone on the other end for approximately 90 seconds. Isabella didn't need to hear what he was saying. The shape of his shoulders was enough. The Long Island City deal was over. Halverson would be on a plane to Palm Beach by Tuesday, and he would not return any of Roman's calls, ever, in the rest of Roman's life. Roman watched it happen. He watched the back of the man whose money he had needed for 14 months speak quietly into a phone in his own foyer. When Roman turned back to the table, his face had gone a color Isabella had only ever seen on bodies in newspaper photographs. Charles, Isabella said, stop reading. Charles stopped, mid-sentence, mid-syllable, the way a piano stops when the lid drops on the keys. Thank you, she said. She walked, on legs that did not feel like her own legs, to the head of the table, to the chair Roman was sitting in, and she stood beside him. She put her hand very lightly on the back of his neck. It was the gesture of a wife. From a distance, on a security camera, it would have read as tender. The 2 captains saw it for what it was. Lou Petrosino's jaw locked. Styx looked at the ceiling. Roman, she said, soft. Don't touch me. Roman, look at your phone. Don't touch me, Bella. Look at your phone, Roman. He looked at his phone. He saw what she had seen. He saw what Halverson, leaving the building, had also seen. His hand came down on the phone fast and clumsy, fingers stiff, and he flipped it face down on the linen tablecloth with a slap that knocked a butter knife onto the floor. The knife rang once, a small bright sound, and lay there. It's nothing, Roman said. All right, Isabella said. It's a guy. It's a guy from Jersey, construction guy. All right. It's nothing, Bella. I believe you. Don't, don't patronize me. She didn't answer. She didn't move her hand off his neck. He was sweating now. He had been sweating for about 4 minutes, but the sweat had only just reached his collar. She could smell it through his cologne. Roman Callahan, who had stood over men in basements in Bayonne and made them say things, was sweating into the collar of a $6,000 shirt. Marco Callahan, the younger brother, the sharp one, the one who had smiled when Vanessa laughed, finally spoke. He had been quiet for 9 minutes. For Marco, that was a long time. Bella. She looked at him. Bella, listen, whatever this is, whatever you got in those folders, we're family, yeah? You and Roman, you guys have a thing right now. Fine, couples have a thing. But we're family. We don't drag in outside people. We don't drag in lawyers. He said lawyers the way some men say a slur. Marco, she said. Yeah. Sit back. Bella, I'm just... Sit back, Marco. He sat back. He didn't want to. His hands clenched on the arms of the chair like a kid told to stay in his seat at school. He was 34 years old. He had killed 2 men that the Bureau knew about, and a third that they didn't. He sat back because his sister-in-law, the woman he had spent 3 years calling Roman's wife in a tone he thought was funny, had told him to. Lou Petrosino spoke next, Mrs. Sinclair. The shift in name was deliberate. Lou was a careful man. He didn't say things he hadn't decided to say. Yes, Lou? Should I leave? You should stay. Yes, ma'am. And Lou? Yes, ma'am. When this is finished tonight, I would like a private conversation with you and Mr. Petrosino. Tomorrow. At a neutral location. My office in Midtown. Roman's head jerked up. You don't have an office in Midtown, Bella. She didn't look at him. Lou. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. Yes, ma'am. Roman's mouth opened. He closed it. He opened it again. He looked at Lou, at his own captain, his own soldier, a man who had carried his father's coffin, and he saw a thing happen in Lou's face that he had never seen happen in Lou's face before, in the 11 years Lou had worked for him. Lou's face went neutral. It went the careful, blank, professional neutral of a man who had just received a job offer from a higher payer and was running the math. Roman saw it. Roman knew exactly what he was seeing. Lou, Roman said. Hoarse. Boss? Lou. Hey. Hey. Lou, look at me. Lou looked at him. Lou, this is my house. This is my dinner. Yeah? She's upset. Women get upset. We're going to handle this. You and me, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., my office, the docks. Okay? Yes, boss, Lou said. He said, boss, the way you say sir to a man whose retirement party you've already started planning. Constance Callahan, who had not spoken since she had pulled her son into the hallway, set both her hands flat on the table in front of her, palms down, fingers spread. The pearls at her throat moved very slightly with her breath. Her wedding ring, heavy, antique, the ring Roman's grandfather had given her 61 years ago, caught the candlelight. Roman, she said. Ma, not now. Roman. He shut up. He shut up the way little boys shut up. Roman, stand up. Ma. Stand up. He stood up. Isabella's hand fell off his neck. She did not step back. She stayed beside his chair. Constance Callahan, 68 years old, 4 feet 11 inches tall in stocking feet, looked up at her oldest son. She had buried his father and his uncle and 2 of his cousins. She had grown up in a house in Bensonhurst where the men did not come home some nights, and you did not ask why. She had survived an entire life by the careful management of what was said at dinner tables. She said, "What did you do?" Ma, what did you do, Roman? Nothing. I didn't do nothing. She's making this into a thing. She's been waiting to make this into a thing. Roman, listen to me. Listen to your mother. Did you know? Did I know what? Did you know what she had? The room held its breath. Roman's face did the worst thing a man's face can do in front of his mother. It begged. It begged silently for half a second before it remembered how to lie. No, he said. No, Ma, I swear to God, I didn't know. She never said anything. She lives like nothing, Ma. She drives a Lexus. We share a checking account. I didn't know. Constance closed her eyes. You stupid boy, she said, very quietly, almost like a lullaby. You stupid, stupid boy. Vanessa Beaumont, who had not been told to be quiet, but who had been receiving the very strong impression that she should be, picked up her clutch from beside her dinner plate. I think I should go, she said. Isabella turned her head. Vanessa froze with her clutch half raised. You sit down, Isabella said. I'm sorry? You sit. Down. Honey, I really think... Don't honey me. You sit down or I will have you escorted to the lobby by the doorman and I will have him personally explain to every reporter who calls this building tomorrow morning exactly how you arrived here tonight and exactly who you arrived to see. Sit down. Vanessa sat down. She sat down very slowly, the way a person sits down on a chair they suspect is wet. Charles? Isabella said. Yes. The second folder. The second lawyer slid the second folder across the table. It came to rest in front of Roman's plate. The plate still had risotto on it, cold now, congealed. A film of olive oil on the surface like a slick on a pond. Open it, Isabella said. Roman didn't move. Open it, Roman? He opened it. He looked at the first page. His face did nothing. He looked at the second page. His face did nothing. He looked at the third page and his face did something that Isabella would think about years later, when she was old, when the city had changed 3 times around her, when she had forgotten most of the small details of her marriage. She would remember the face Roman made on the third page. It was the face of a man being shown a photograph of himself he didn't remember posing for. What is this? He said. You know what it is. Bella, you know what it is, Roman. This is... His finger jabbed the page. This is bullshit. These are inflated. These are... Bella, who gave you this? Page 4. Bella. Page 4. Roman. He turned to page 4. He stopped breathing for approximately 2 seconds. Isabella, who had been watching very carefully, counted them. Page 7, she said. Bella, stop. Page 7. Stop. Page 7, Roman, or I read it out loud. He turned to page 7. He looked at it. He closed the folder. He put both his palms flat on top of the folder, the way a man holds down a thing that might float away. Dominic Callahan, the dumb brother, the one who had hugged Isabella too hard, finally spoke. His voice was small. What's in it? He said. To nobody, to the air. Roman, what's in it? Shut up, Dom. Roman, what's in the folder? Dominic, shut up. Marco's eyes moved between his older brother and the folder and his sister-in-law. Marco was doing math. Marco had always been doing math. You could see him doing it. He was figuring out in real time which side of this table he was going to be sitting on by Monday morning. Isabella picked up the folder. She slid it down the table, slowly, with 2 fingers, until it came to rest in front of Marco. You can look, she said. Marco looked at her. He looked at Roman. He looked at the folder. Bella, Roman said. Don't, Bella. Listen to me. Don't. Marco opened the folder. Marco read page 1. Marco read page 4. Marco read page 7. Marco closed the folder very carefully. Marco set both his hands on the table the same way his mother had, palms down, fingers spread. Marco said, to nobody, Holy Mother. Marco, Roman said. Holy Mother of God, Ro. Marco, you did what? It's not what it looks like. Ro, look at me. Look at me. You are telling me in this folder, in front of all these people, in front of Ma, you took money from the Genovese to move product through our docks without telling Lou, without telling me, without telling anybody. You took their money and you ran their... Roman. They are gonna kill you. The word kill hung in the room like a bell that had been struck and not yet stopped ringing. Lou Petrosino's eyes closed. Not flinched. Closed. Like a man who has just had a question answered that he had been carrying around in his stomach for 8 months. Lou, Styx said, very quietly. Lou, I heard. Lou, did you... I heard, Styx. Roman shot to his feet for the second time. This time the chair didn't tip. Marco caught it without looking, but Roman's hand swept across the table and he caught the edge of Vanessa's wine glass. And the glass went over and the Brunello spread across the white linen in a shape that, Isabella noticed with a cold and almost amused part of her brain, looked exactly like a state on a map. Maybe New Jersey, maybe Florida. "That folder is fake," Roman shouted. "That folder is manufactured. That is corporate espionage. That is theft. That is... Charles, look at me. That is fabricated. You doctored those documents. I want a forensic accountant in this room in 20 minutes. I want..." "Roman," Charles said, calmly, with the tone of a man putting away a chess piece. "Every document in that folder was filed by you under your own signature in your own hand with banks in Andorra, in St. Kitts, and in the Caymans between February of last year and August of this year. We did not manufacture them. We simply collected them. You broke into... We bought them." The room went still. "You bought them," Roman said, "from people in those institutions who were willing to be paid more by us than by you. Yes, you bought them. Mr. Callahan, we have been buying them for 19 months. Isabella watched Roman's face when Charles said 19 months. It was the same face from earlier, the face of a man being shown a photograph of himself he didn't remember posing for. But worse, now, deeper, because what he was being shown was that the photograph had been taken from inside his own house, by his own wife, while he was sleeping next to her. 19 months, Roman whispered. Yes. Bella. She didn't answer. Bella, 19 months. Yes, Roman. You were... His voice cracked. It was not a beautiful crack. It was an ugly, wet, surprised crack. The crack of a thing that hadn't cracked in a long time. You were watching me. For 19 months. While you slept in my... While we... Yes. Why? Because of the night you came home from Bracco's. He stopped. He stopped the way a man stops when he has stepped on something sharp in the dark. Bella, 2 years ago, Roman, February. You came home at 4:12 in the morning. You washed your hands in the kitchen sink. You washed them for 16 minutes. I watched you do it from the hallway. You never knew I was there. The water ran for 16 minutes. And the next morning, in the paper, there was a small story about a man found in a car in Red Hook. And the morning after that, you brought me a necklace, Tiffany's, yellow diamonds. You said you'd been thinking of me. You said you wanted to celebrate. She walked finally to the head of the table. She picked up his whiskey glass. She set it down on the other side of his plate, out of his reach. That was the morning I called Charles, she said. Bella, that was the morning I started watching you. Bella, don't... You wore the necklace for me on Valentine's Day, Roman. I wore it 3 times. I still have it. It's in the safe in the closet. Behind the Hermes box. The combination is your mother's birthday backwards. You never knew that either. Constance Callahan made a small sound. It was not a sob. It was not a word. It was the sound an old woman makes when she has just understood something she should have understood a year ago. Roman put his hand on the back of his own chair. He needed it. His legs were not all the way working. You set me up, he said. No, Roman. You set me up. I gave you 19 months to be the man you said you were. That is not... 19 months, Roman. From the night you washed your hands to tonight. I gave you 19 months. I cooked your veal. I went to your mother's birthday. I sat through Christmas. I sat through Easter. I sat through the night you put your hand on the small of my back at the Met Gala and introduced me to the governor as the wife. I sat through every single thing, Roman, for 19 months, and I waited for you to be 1/10 of the man my grandfather was for 30 seconds. And tonight, in front of your mother, in front of Halverson, in front of Lou, you told me to pour her wine. Vanessa flinched at her. And that, Isabella said, was when I stopped waiting. Roman's mouth opened. It stayed open. Nothing came out. The front door buzzer rang. Everyone in the room jumped except Isabella and Charles. That'll be the second team, Charles said, looking at his watch. Second team, Marco said. Forensic accountants, Charles said. 3 of them. They'll be working through the night in the study with Mrs. Sinclair's authorization on the personal accounts. In my house, Roman said. It is not your house, Mr. Callahan. What? The penthouse is held by a trust. The trust is held by a holding company. The holding company resolves, as I believe I mentioned earlier, to Mrs. Sinclair. You are, as of this morning, a guest. Roman's hand left the back of the chair. He took one step toward Charles Whitaker. It was not a long step, but it was a step. And Lou Petrosino was on his feet before the step finished, and Styx was on his feet a half second after Lou, and the two younger lawyers stepped between Roman and Charles without appearing to hurry, and the whole motion happened so fast and so silently that it was clear to everyone in the room that it had been rehearsed. "Roman," Lou said, soft. "Roman, sit down, boss." "Lou." "Boss? Sit. Down." "Lou, you work for me." Lou Petrosino did not answer. He just looked at Roman with the very tired, very honest eyes of a 62-year-old man who had given 30 years of his life to a family that was now, in front of him, evaporating into the air like steam off a cup of coffee in winter. "Lou," Roman said again, smaller. Lou, hey, come on. It's me." Lou looked at his shoes. Roman turned to his brothers. "Marco. Dom. Hey. Boys." Dominic looked at his lap. Marco looked at Isabella. Marco said slowly, carefully, the way a man crosses a frozen lake, Bella, listen. If you and Roman are gonna settle this civilly, yeah? I'm here. I can mediate. I can talk to Ro. I can talk to Ma. I'm here. We can make this work, Bella. Family is family." "Marco." "Yeah. You're at my office on Monday, 9 a.m. Wear a suit." Marco's mouth opened slightly. Then his eyes, and Isabella saw it. She saw it land. His eyes went bright. Hungry. Marco understood. Marco had always understood. Marco was being offered a chair at a different table, and Marco had spent 34 years standing at the wrong one. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Marco." Roman's voice cracked open. "Marco. Marco. Don't!" Marco didn't look at him. The doorman buzzer rang again. "Let them up, please," Isabella said to nobody. One of the lawyers walked to the foyer panel and buzzed up the second team. Roman stood in the middle of his own dining room. His wife was at the head of the table. His mother had closed her eyes. His brother had switched sides. His captain had switched sides. His mistress had been told to sit and had sat. His investor had walked out. His phone had a federal text on it, face down, on the tablecloth, soaking through the spilled Brunello. He looked slowly around the room. He was looking, Isabella understood, for one person in his entire life who was still on his side. He didn't find them. His eyes came back to her. "Bella," he said. It was a whisper. "Bella, please." She walked the 11 feet for the third and last time that night. She stopped in front of him. She was small. She had always been small. She had to look up at him to look him in the eye. She looked up. "Roman." "Bella." "You're going to sit down." "Bella, please." "You're going to sit down. You're going to put your phone face up on the table. You're going to open the message from Federal. You're going to read it out loud. To this room, to your mother, to your brothers, to Lou, to me. You're going to read it out loud, Roman, and then we're going to talk about what you do for the next 12 hours of your life." Bella. "You read it out loud, Roman, or I read it out loud. And trust me, you'd rather I let you say it." She watched his face. She watched him understand that there was no version of the next 12 hours in which he was not, in some sense, already dead. That whether Federal meant a wire, or an indictment, or a handler, or a flip, or a meeting in a parking garage in Newark, whatever Federal meant, Federal was the end of the man he had been an hour ago. Federal was the door at the end of the hallway, and his wife, the woman he had told to refill another woman's glass, was standing between him and every other door in the building. He reached for the phone. His hand was shaking. Isabella had never seen Roman's hand shake before, not once, not in 3 years. His hand was shaking the way an old man's hand shakes when he is signing a will. He flipped the phone face up. The screen had locked. He thumbed it open with a code Isabella had memorized 18 months ago and never used. The message expanded. He read. His face, which had been pale, went the color of putty. His mouth opened. He looked up, not at Isabella, not at his mother, not at Lou. He looked at Marco, his little brother, the math kid, the one who had just been promoted. Marco, Roman said. Yeah. Marco. They know about the warehouse. Marco's face went white. What warehouse? The warehouse in Maspeth. Roman. The warehouse in Maspeth, Marco. Roman, which warehouse in Maspeth? There's 3. The one with the people, Marco. The room stopped. It didn't go quiet. It had been quiet. It stopped, like a film stopping on a single frame. Constance Callahan opened her eyes. Lou Petrosino's hand moved, by old reflex, to a place under his jacket where there was nothing tonight because Isabella had asked the doorman to disarm her guests at the elevator. Styx looked for the first time directly at Isabella, and the look was not professional anymore. It was the look of a man who has just realized he is standing in the wrong room of the wrong house on the wrong night of his life. Isabella did not move. She had not known about a warehouse in Maspeth. She had not known about people. Her file was thick. Her file was 19 months deep. Her file went all the way down to bank records in St. Kitts, but her file had not had the word Maspeth in it, and it had not had the word people. She kept her face perfectly, perfectly still, because the second rule her grandfather had taught her, after the one about power never announcing itself, was this: when a man hands you a weapon you didn't know existed, you do not, under any circumstances, let him see you flinch. Roman, she said, calm, even. The voice of a woman who has known about Maspeth for 19 months. Sit down. We're going to talk about the warehouse. Roman sat down. He sat down because there was nowhere else in the entire city of New York for Roman Callahan to go. And in the foyer, the elevator chimed, and the 3 forensic accountants stepped out, carrying laptop cases and a small black box that Isabella did not recognize and had not asked Charles about. And behind them, half a step behind, walked a 4th man Isabella had never seen before. A man in a navy windbreaker over a button-down shirt, no tie, federal posture, federal shoes, federal eyes. And the man in the windbreaker looked across the foyer and into the dining room and met Isabella's eyes. And he nodded at her, once, the small professional nod of a man who has been waiting in a car downstairs for 90 minutes and has just been told he is finally allowed to come up. Roman saw the nod. Roman's hand on the table closed around the stem of his own broken wine glass. Roman's hand closed around the stem of the broken wine glass, and a thin line of blood opened across the meat of his palm. He didn't feel it. That was the thing Isabella noticed first. He didn't feel it. The blood ran down his wrist and into the cuff of the $6,000 shirt, and he didn't look at it, didn't react to it, didn't even know it was happening. His eyes were locked on the man in the navy windbreaker who had just stepped off her elevator and into her foyer. The man in the windbreaker was about 40, lean, hair cut shorter on one side than the other, the way men cut their own hair when they don't have time for the barber. He had the kind of face that you would not remember if you sat across from him on the subway. Federal face. Designed for forgetting. He came to the threshold of the dining room. He stopped there. He did not step inside. He understood the way men in that work understood, that the room he was about to enter belonged to someone else, and he had been invited, and the invitation could be withdrawn. Mrs. Sinclair, he said, voice low, voice flat. Agent? Special Agent in Charge Daniel Foley, New York Field Office. Agent Foley. Ma'am, I want to confirm with you, on the record, before I take another step into your home, that the conversation we had on the phone at 4:18 this afternoon, the parameters of that conversation are still in effect. The dining room, which had stopped, did not start again. It got worse. Lou Petrosino's eyes closed for the 3rd time that night and stayed closed. Marco's mouth, which had been open since the word Maspeth, closed, then opened, then closed again. Constance Callahan, very slowly, picked up her water glass and drank from it. The glass shook in her hand. She set it down. Roman did not move. He did not blink. He did not breathe. He was looking at Isabella, and his face had gone past pale, past putty, past the color of bodies in newspaper photographs, into a place where it was not really a color anymore, just an absence. Bella, he whispered. She did not look at him. Agent Foley, she said. Calm. The voice was so calm it was almost gentle. The parameters are confirmed. Come in, please. Agent Foley came in. He did not sit down. He stood at the far end of the dining table, opposite the head, where Isabella had been seated all evening. He set a thin manila folder on the table. He did not open it. "Bella," Roman said, louder, the voice cracking. "Bella, look at me. Look at me, Bella. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me." She did not look at him. She looked at Charles Whitaker. And in that single look, half a second, no more, something happened in Isabella Sinclair's face that nobody in that room, except Charles, was equipped to read. A small, very small crease appeared between her eyebrows. Charles saw it. Charles, who had known her since she was 11 years old, saw it. Charles's face did not change. He did not nod. He did not move. But the air in the room around Charles, somehow, around the small, dry, pale figure of him in the charcoal overcoat, the air seemed to draw in, as if he had taken a breath and not let it out. Because the small crease in Isabella's forehead said this: "I did not call Agent Foley at 4:18 this afternoon. She had called Charles at 4:18 this afternoon." Charles. Not the Bureau, not the field office. Not Special Agent Daniel Foley of the New York Division. Charles. She kept her face still. She had practiced keeping her face still for 22 years since she was 9 years old, and a school bully had broken her favorite pen, and she had learned that day, sitting in the principal's office with her grandfather, that the face is the last thing you ever give away. She kept her face still. "Agent Foley," she said. "Please proceed." Agent Foley opened the folder. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "Roman Anthony Callahan. At 8:51 p.m. this evening, a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of New York returned a sealed indictment naming you on 23 counts. Those counts include racketeering, conspiracy to commit racketeering, money laundering in excess of $100 million, conspiracy to obstruct justice, conspiracy to commit murder, and trafficking in persons. I have a copy of the indictment here. I am not arresting you tonight. I am here, at the request of your wife, to deliver a single piece of information to you and to give you a single window of time to make a single decision. Do you understand?" Roman did not answer. He could not answer. His hand was still closed on the stem of the broken wine glass. The blood had soaked through the cuff and was now slow on the white linen tablecloth, pooling in a small, perfectly round drop next to the spilled Brunello. 2 reds, one darker than the other. "Mr. Callahan, do you understand?" "He understands," Marco said. "Mr. Callahan, sir, I need to hear it from you." Yeah, I understand. Good. The information I am here to deliver is this. The warehouse in Maspeth was raided at 7:47 p.m. this evening. We recovered 11 living individuals and the remains of 2. The 11 living individuals are in federal custody and they are talking. One of them is talking very specifically about you, Mr. Callahan, and about a meeting that took place at that warehouse on the night of February 9th of last year. At approximately 4 a.m. we have audio, we have video, we have your watch on a security feed inside that warehouse. The watch your wife gave you for your 40th birthday. The Patek. The serial number matches. Roman's hand opened. The wineglass stem fell out of it onto the table and rolled. "Bella," he said. He didn't say it loud. He said it the way a child says mom at 3 a.m, half asleep from another room. "Bella, Mr. Callahan, the window I am offering you is the following. You have 1 hour. In 1 hour, agents will arrive at this building with a warrant for your arrest on all 23 counts. If in that hour you choose to walk out of this apartment with me, voluntarily, and you agree, in writing, in front of these witnesses, to begin formal cooperation with the United States Attorney's Office tonight. Tonight, sir, not tomorrow, tonight. Then the indictment will be unsealed in a modified form. 16 counts, not 23. And you will not spend tonight in the holding cell at Metropolitan Detention. You will spend it in a federal hotel room in Midtown, with a guard at your door, in a bed, with a phone, while my colleagues and your lawyer work out the structure of your testimony." Agent Foley paused. He let the silence sit. "If you do not take the window, sir, that's fine. I'll come back in an hour with the warrant. 23 counts. Metropolitan Detention. You'll be in front of a magistrate at 10 tomorrow morning. Bail will be denied. And I want to be clear with you, Mr. Callahan, because I have read your file very carefully over the past 9 months. And I want you to hear this from a person who has actually read it. Bail will be denied, and you will not see the inside of your apartment, or your mother's apartment, or any apartment that is not run by the Bureau of Prisons for the rest of your natural life. Do you understand the window, sir?
Bella. Do you understand the window, sir? You sold me. Bella, you sold me to the federal government. Isabella finally looked at him. No, Roman, she said. No, Roman. You sold yourself. I just kept the receipts.
I kept the receipts for 19 months. I gave them to the right people. And tonight, after the wine, I made the phone call I had been refusing to make for 18 of those 19 months. You did this, Roman. The night you washed your hands in our kitchen for 16 minutes, you did this. The night you brought yellow diamonds home to celebrate, you did this. The night you put a woman in a black dress next to you at our table and told me to pour her wine, you finished doing this. I am not the reason. I am only the witness. It was the longest she had spoken all evening. The words came out level and clean, and they did not shake. Inside her, somewhere underneath her sternum, something was screaming. She was thinking about Charles. She was thinking about the phone call at 4:18 this afternoon. She was thinking about the exact words she had used. Bring everything. That was what she had said. 3 words. She had not said call the Bureau. She had not said contact Agent Foley. She had not said the word cooperator, or indictment, or grand jury, or anything that even gestured at federal involvement. She had said, bring everything, meaning the file, meaning the documents, meaning the lawyers, meaning the formal request in writing for the freezing of the joint accounts and the unwinding of the marriage. She had not, at any point, called the FBI. Charles had called the FBI. Charles had called the FBI on his own. And he had done it. The math worked backwards now. He had done it 9 months ago, at minimum, because Agent Foley had said, I have read your file very carefully over the past 9 months. And Foley had said it with the bored certainty of a man who had been working a case, not the relieved hurry of a man who had just been handed one. Charles had been running, alongside her investigation, his own. Charles had handed Roman Callahan to the federal government 9 months ago. Before tonight, before the wine, before the dinner, before the bottle in her hand, before she had decided. He had decided for her. He had decided for her 9 months ago. Isabella kept her face perfectly still. She had been holding very still for so long that her shoulders had begun to ache, a small dull burn under the blade of each one, the way a swimmer's shoulders burn after a long swim. She let none of it show. Mr. Callahan, Agent Foley said, the window is now 57 minutes. I need a decision. I'd say 57 minutes, sir. Bella, 56, sir. Roman looked again for someone in the room. His mother had turned her face to the wall. His older soldier was looking at the floor. His younger brother was already standing. Isabella saw it without turning her head. The small shift of weight, the small adjustment of the suit jacket, was already standing slightly behind her chair, slightly to her right, in the position of a man taking up the second chair at a new table. His mistress was crying without making any sound. The tears were ruining her makeup. She did not wipe them. Roman looked, finally, at Lou Petrosino. Lou, 30 years, 2 funerals, a goddaughter. Lou, Roman whispered. Lou Petrosino did not look up. Lou said very quietly to the floor, Boss, take the window. Lou, take the window, Roman. Lou, you... Take the window, Ro. Roman's whole body shook, once, hard, the way a wet dog shakes off water. He sat down. He had not realized he was standing. He sat down, and his elbow hit the broken stem of the wine glass, and the stem rolled and fell off the table and broke on the floor with a small bright sound, and he did not look at it. Okay, he said. Mr. Callahan. Okay. I need that on the record, sir. I'll take the window. I'll take the goddamn window. Get me out of here. Yes, sir. Get me out of this apartment, Foley. Yes, sir. In a moment, sir. There's paperwork. Your lawyer is in the lobby. He's been there for 90 minutes. My... what? Your lawyer, sir. Mr. Cohen. He was retained at approximately 3 this afternoon. He's been waiting downstairs since 6:30. He's been briefed. Roman looked at Isabella. Bella. Yes, Roman. You retained Cohen. I retained him for you? Yes. This afternoon. Yes.
You retained me a defense attorney this afternoon. Yes, Roman. You knew. You knew at 3 this afternoon. I knew the moment you told me Vanessa was staying. I retained Cohen between 3 and 3:20. I retained him in your name on your behalf, and I paid his retainer out of your personal account. He's a good attorney. He's the best in the city. You'll need him.
I'm not your enemy tonight, Roman. I want you to understand that. I have not been your enemy tonight. I have been the only person in this room, including your mother, who has spent the last 19 months preparing the soft place you are going to land. The retainer for Cohen. The bed in Midtown. The window with Foley. The 16 counts instead of 23. Those are mine. I bought you those, Roman. With my money. Tonight. While you were ordering me to refill her wine. She turned finally and looked at Vanessa. Vanessa had stopped crying. Vanessa was just sitting there. The black dress was wrinkled now, in a way it had not been at 6:45. The makeup was ruined. The clutch was on the floor at her feet. She had not picked it up. Ms. Beaumont, Isabella said. Vanessa flinched. Ms. Beaumont, look at me, please. Vanessa looked. Vanessa. Ms. Beaumont, you have 11 minutes from the time my doorman calls a car for you to get into that car. You will not return to this building. You will not return any phone call from any member of this family. You will not speak to any reporter, any podcaster, any documentary producer, any author, any biographer, any acquaintance of yours, any acquaintance of mine, any acquaintance of Roman's, about anything you have seen or heard in this room tonight. If you do, my attorneys will file against you in 3 jurisdictions, a series of civil actions so well-resourced and so unrelenting that by the time they finish, you will be working a register in a town none of us have ever heard of. Do you understand me? Vanessa nodded. Out loud, Ms. Beaumont. Yes. Yes what? Yes, ma'am. Stand up. Vanessa stood up. She bent down very carefully, like a woman with a bad back, and she picked up the clutch off the floor. She walked, on legs that were not quite working, to the foyer. The second lawyer escorted her to the elevator. The elevator doors opened. They closed. She was gone. That was the last time Vanessa Beaumont ever stood inside that building. Isabella turned back to the table. Charles? She said. Yes. I need to speak with you, privately, for 2 minutes. The study. A pause. A small pause. So small that no one but Charles would have noticed it. Then, of course. Agent Foley, please continue with Mr. Callahan. The paperwork. The window. Lou Petrosino. Would you sit with Mr. Callahan, please, until we return? Lou looked up. His eyes were wet. Yes, ma'am. Marco, stay where you are. Yes, ma'am. Constance, drink some water. Constance, who had been staring at the wall, slowly turned her head. Her eyes met Isabella's. There was nothing in them that resembled affection. There never had been. But there was now, for the first time in 3 years, a small, exhausted, grudging respect. The respect of one old woman for another, although Isabella was not old, although Isabella was 31 years old in a navy dress with her hair clipped back. I'll drink some water, dear, Constance said. Thank you, Constance. Isabella walked, alone, out of the dining room. Charles followed her. She did not look back at her husband. She did not look back at her marriage. She walked down the hallway, past the framed black and white photographs of nothing in particular, chosen 3 years ago by a decorator who Roman had not liked, and who Isabella had paid double, and she pushed open the door to the study with the flat of her hand, and she walked inside, and she waited until Charles was in the room behind her, and she heard the door click closed, and only then did she turn around. Charles? Yes. You called Foley. Charles Whitaker, 68 years old, 6 feet tall in his stocking feet, the man who had taught her how to read a balance sheet when she was 12, looked at her without blinking and said, Yes. When? February. This February. Yes. You called the Federal Bureau of Investigation about my husband in February, and you did not tell me. No, I did not tell you. Charles. Isabella. Why? He did not answer right away. He walked very slowly, with the careful, unhurried steps of an old man, to the small bar cart she kept beside the bookshelves. He picked up a tumbler. He poured himself 1 inch of bourbon. He did not drink it. He held it. Your grandfather, he said, told me something 3 weeks before he died. We were in the hospital. You had gone down to the cafeteria to get him a coffee he wasn't allowed to drink. He took my hand. His hand was already very small by then. He said, Charles, I'm going to leave her everything, everything. And the world will do what the world does to a young woman who has been left everything. The world will send men. Charles. The world will send men who look like husbands. And on the day she chooses the wrong one, you will be the only person in her life who knows it before she does. And on that day, Charles, I am not asking you to protect her from her own choices. I am asking you to make sure that when her choice finally turns on her, and it will turn on her, Charles, that kind of man always turns, that there is no version of the consequence she cannot survive. Do you understand me, Charles? I'm asking you to make her survival a foregone conclusion, long before she knows she will need it. He looked down at the bourbon. He still did not drink it. I called Foley in February, he said, because in February I read a transcript of a phone call your husband made to a man named Anthony Bracco, and in that transcript, your husband used a word, with reference to you, that I will not repeat in this room, ever. And in that moment, Isabella, I understood that the day your grandfather warned me about had arrived, and I understood that the consequence, when it came, was going to be bigger than the consequence you had been preparing. And I understood, finally, that if I did not act on my own, without telling you, the man you had married was going to live long enough to do you actual harm. So I called Foley, and I gave him a file, and I told him to be ready, and I told him to wait for the phone call from you that I knew sooner or later would come. The phone call came tonight. 3 words. Bring everything. And I brought everything, Isabella. I brought everything. She was holding the back of a wing-back chair. She had not realized she was holding it. Her knuckles were white. Charles, she said. Yes. You decided. You decided for me. For 9 months. You decided what I was capable of surviving, and you did not ask me. Yes? You went around me. Yes. You took the most important decision of my adult life, and you took it out of my hands. Yes, Isabella, I did. Why didn't you tell me? He looked up. The old man's eyes were wet, but the tears did not fall. He had practiced for many years not to let them fall. Because I am not your grandfather, he said, and I knew that if I told you, in February or in March, or in any month of this year, you would have done the thing he taught you to do. You would have waited. You would have waited for the right moment. You would have waited for the perfect humiliation. You would have waited for the night you could end him cleanly, in front of his mother, with 1 phone call. And in that waiting, Isabella, I believed, with every part of my professional judgment, that he was going to put his hands on you. And I made a choice. I made the choice to take that risk off the table, without your permission, because your grandfather asked me to make your survival a foregone conclusion, and I am 68 years old, Isabella, and I have never broken a promise to that man, and I was not prepared to start in February. She let go of the wingback chair. She walked slowly to the window. The window of the study looked east, over the dark river, over the bridges, over a city that did not know, would never know. What had happened in this apartment between the hours of 7 and 10 on a Friday night in November? She put her forehead against the glass. The glass was cold. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She had not cried since she was 19 years old. She did not know, anymore, how to do it. She had cried, at 19, beside her grandfather's hospital bed. And after that, she had put it down, the way some people put down smoking, and she had not picked it up again. She breathed. She breathed the way her grandfather had taught her to breathe when she was 9 years old, and a school bully had broken her favorite pen on purpose. She breathed. She breathed. She breathed. Charles, she said, to the glass. Yes. You went around me. Yes. You will not ever, in the remainder of your time working for me, go around me again. About anything. About a parking ticket. about a misfiled tax document, about the weather. You will not, ever again, decide for me what I am capable of surviving. Am I understood? A pause. A long pause. Then behind her, very quietly, very steadily, the voice of the only man left in her life she trusted. Yes, Isabella, you are understood. Good. Isabella. Yes. For what it's worth. Yes. He was going to put his hands on you in the next 60 days. I am as certain of that as I have ever been of anything. The transcripts were specific. She did not turn around. I know, Charles, she said. You knew. I knew at the Met Gala 2 months ago. He squeezed my arm in the receiving line. He squeezed it hard enough to leave 4 marks. I covered them with foundation for 6 days. The room was very quiet. Isabella. Don't, Charles. Isabella, Don't. We don't have time. Foley is in my dining room. My husband is in my dining room. The forensic accountants are in my dining room. My mother-in-law is in my dining room drinking water. Marco Callahan, who tomorrow morning is going to be the new acting head of a family that no longer exists, is in my dining room. We have a very small number of minutes, Charles, before everything that happens in the next 10 years of my life is decided. We need to go back. Yes. One more thing. Yes. She turned, finally, away from the window. Her face was the face he had known since she was 11. There was nothing in it that he had not put there himself, with his own hands, over 22 years of teaching. The 4th folder, she said. Charles did not move. Charles did not breathe. You brought 4 folders into this house tonight, Charles. I watched the lawyers carry them in. 3 are on the dining table. The 4th is in the case at your foot. I want to know what is in the 4th folder. Charles, for the first and only time in 22 years of working for her, looked away. Isabella, he said, quietly. Charles, you are not ready for the 4th folder. Charles, you are not ready, Isabella, not tonight. What is in the 4th folder, Charles? He swallowed. He took finally a small sip of the bourbon, the first drink she had ever, in 22 years, seen him take in a working hour. He set the glass down. He said, It is not about him. She went still. It is about whom, Charles? Isabella, please. It is about whom? A long silence. Then, in a voice she had never heard him use before, a voice that did not belong to the dry, exact, careful man she had known since she was a child, but to a much older, much more tired man underneath him, Charles Whitaker said, It is about your father. Isabella Sinclair, who had not cried since she was 19, who had walked the length of her own dining table 3 times in a navy dress, while her husband's empire fell, who had ordered a federal agent into her foyer and a mistress into an elevator, who had eaten 3 bites of veal she had not tasted, stood very still in the middle of her own study. Her father. Her father had died. Her father had died when she was 4 years old. A car, in the rain, on a wet curve outside of Bridgehampton, going home from a dinner he should not have been at. That was the story. That was the only story. That was the story her grandfather had told her on the morning of her 5th birthday, with both his hands on her shoulders and his face very close to hers. And that was the story she had carried in her chest for 27 years. The way you carry a coin in a pocket so old you no longer feel the weight. And Charles Whitaker, Charles, 68 years old, the man who had walked her down the aisle 3 years ago because there was no other man left in her life qualified for the walk, was standing in her study with a glass of bourbon in his hand, telling her that the 4th folder was about her father. She did not move. She did not breathe. She did not sit down. Charles, she said. He looked at her. Charles. The car accident. Isabella. The car. In the rain. Bridgehampton. The curve by the bay. The rain. Isabella. Sit down. I will not sit down. Isabella. The car, Charles. He closed his eyes. He closed them the way a man closes his eyes when he is being asked to say a thing he has waited 27 years to say, and he is not, even now, sure he is ready to say it. There was no car accident, he said. 3 feet from her, the old radiator under the window made a small ticking sound, the way old radiators do in old buildings in November, when the heat first comes on. Charles.
There was no car, Isabella. Or there was a car. There was a car that ended up in the bay. But your father did not die in that car. Your father... I am sorry, Isabella. I am sorry. You asked me. I am telling you. Your father was killed on the night before that car went into the bay, in a house on Gin Lane, by a man your grandfather had been doing business with for 11 years. The car was a story we built, with money, with pressure, with 2 coroners, with 1 editor at the Times. It took 6 weeks. We buried your father in a closed casket on a Thursday morning in May because there was no version of your father on that Thursday morning that a 4-year-old child could have been allowed to see. That is the truth, Isabella. That is the only truth I have ever lied to you about. And I lied to you about it because your grandfather asked me to, and because I believed at the time that you were a child, and that the lie was kinder than the truth. She was holding the back of the wingback chair again. She did not remember reaching for it. Who? She said. Isabella. Who? Charles. He looked at her. He looked at her for what felt, to her, like a long time. But it was not a long time. It was about 3 seconds. Time was doing something strange in the room. Time was moving the way water moves under ice, slowly, in one direction, indifferent to the people standing on top of it. The man, Charles said, who killed your father on Gin Lane, in May of that year. Yes. The man who killed your father was a young man at the time, 22. He was working for a family out of South Brooklyn. He had been sent by an older man, his capo, to deliver a message. The message went badly. Your father was not the message. Your father was the man in the wrong room of the wrong house at the wrong hour. His name, Isabella. His name, Charles. Charles set the bourbon glass down. He set it down very carefully on the small marble coaster on the bar cart, lining it up with the edge. The young man's name, he said, was Anthony Bracco. Isabella did not move. She did not move for a very long time. The radiator ticked. Somewhere down the hall, in the dining room, she could hear Agent Foley's voice, low and even, walking Roman through a sentence he did not want to repeat. She could hear, faintly, the sound of one of the forensic accountants opening and closing a laptop. She could hear the elevator, 2 walls away, descending toward the lobby. She could hear, beneath all of it, the small dry tap of November rain on the window. Anthony Bracco. The man in the trunk of the car in Red Hook. The man her husband had washed his hands of for 16 minutes in their kitchen sink on a February morning 2 years ago. The man whose death had been the trigger. The reason she had called Charles. The reason she had begun the file. The reason she had spent 19 months collecting paper. Anthony Bracco. Roman had killed the man who killed her father. Roman had killed the man who killed her father, and Roman had not known. He had not known. He had killed Anthony Bracco for a different reason in a different folder, a reason involving a shipment, a reason involving money, a reason involving the small, ugly arithmetic of the life Roman lived. And on that February morning, while she stood in the dark of the hallway and watched her husband wash a man's blood off his hands, the man whose blood it was had been, without anyone in the world knowing, the only person in her life whose death she had any right to want. And Roman, who had spent every night beside her for 3 years, had not known. And she, who had hated him for every minute of those 16 minutes at the kitchen sink, had not known. And Charles had known. Charles? Yes. Did you tell Roman? What? Did you tell Roman? About my father? About Bracco? Did you at any point communicate to my husband, directly or indirectly, that the man he had been instructed to remove had been the man responsible for the death of his wife's father? A pause. No, Isabella. You did not direct him. No. You did not arrange it. No, Isabella, I did not. You did not. Charles, look at me. You did not give him the name. You did not put Bracco in his path. You did not, through some intermediary, suggest to Roman, 6 months into our marriage, that there was a man named Anthony Bracco in South Brooklyn who would be doing the family a service by going away. Isabella, no. Are you lying to me, Charles? I have lied to you exactly 1 time in my life, Isabella. I lied to you about the car. I am not lying to you now. I did not put Bracco in front of your husband. Your husband found Bracco on his own.
for his own reasons, in his own life. That those reasons happened to remove from this world the man who took your father from you. That is a coincidence, Isabella. It is the only coincidence in any of this. And I have spent 2 years sitting with it, alone, in my office on Madison Avenue, trying to understand whether to tell you, because I knew that the moment I told you, you would do. I do not know what you would do. I have known you for 22 years, and I do not know what you do, in this room, in the next 5 minutes, with this information. She let go of the chair. She walked to the window. She did not put her forehead against the glass this time. She just stood there. Below her, the city went on, the cars went on, the bridges went on, the rain went on. She thought very clearly, the way you think when you are about to vomit. I have spent 19 months destroying the man who avenged my father. She thought with the same clarity, he did not know. And I did not know. And we lived in the same apartment, slept in the same bed, ate at the same table, and neither of us knew. And the lawyer downstairs and the agent in my dining room and the indictment in his folder are real, and the warehouse in Maspeth is real, and the 11 living people and the 2 remains are real, and Roman Callahan is a man who deserves every single count of those 23. She thought, and he is also, in some small, terrible, accidental way, the only man in my life who ever did anything for me before I asked. She thought, and he did not know he was doing it. She did not cry. She breathed. She breathed. She breathed. Charles. Yes. Burn the 4th folder. Isabella. Burn the 4th folder, Charles. Tonight, in your fireplace, in your apartment. I want it on video. I want every copy. I want every digital file. I want the chain of custody. I want every analyst who touched it sat down at my office in Midtown tomorrow morning at 9 and signed under penalty of perjury that they will never speak of it again. I want it gone, Charles, the way my father was gone the morning of my 5th birthday. I want the lie my grandfather told me to be the truth I die with. Do you understand me? Isabella, do you understand me, Charles? Yes? Good. Isabella, don't. Isabella, don't, Charles. Don't. Not now. Not in this room. Not in this dress. We have a federal agent in my dining room and a marriage to dissolve and a $56 million shipping concern in Baltimore to refinance on Tuesday. We have work. Tonight is work. The other thing, what you just told me. What my grandfather hid for 27 years. That is for a Sunday morning. That is for a Sunday morning 6 months from now when there is no more paperwork in this building. We will speak about it then, with coffee, and not before. Am I understood? Yes, Isabella. Burn it tonight. Yes, Isabella. Go. Isabella. Go, Charles. Tell Foley I'll be there in 2 minutes. He went. He went the way an old man goes, slowly, in stalking quiet steps, closing the door behind him with the smallest possible sound. The door clicked. She was alone in the study. For 4 seconds, no more, she allowed her face to do what it had not been allowed to do all evening. It cracked. It cracked the way a sheet of ice cracks under the boot of a man crossing a pond, a small, dry, surprise sound somewhere inside her that no one in any other room would have heard. Her mouth opened, her shoulders came down. Her hands, which had been steady all evening, went to the edge of her grandfather's old mahogany desk, and they shook, finally, for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. She bent forward. She put her forehead this time on the cold, dark wood of the desk. She breathed. She breathed. She breathed. When she lifted her head, the 4 seconds were over. She straightened her dress at the hip. She tucked one piece of hair behind her ear. She turned to the small antique mirror on the wall beside the door, the mirror her grandfather had bought in Florence in 1972, and she checked very quickly her face. Her face was fine. Her face had always been fine. She walked out of the study. The dining room, when she came back into it, had reorganized itself the way a chessboard reorganizes itself in the middle of a long game. Roman was sitting. Lou was beside him with one hand on his shoulder. Lou's hand was not comforting. Lou's hand was holding him in the chair. Charles had returned to his place near the wall, his face the dry, careful face Isabella had known her whole life, with nothing in it of the man he had just been for 90 seconds in her study. Agent Foley had pulled out a chair and was sitting in the chair Vanessa Beaumont had been sitting in an hour ago. The chair still smelled of Vanessa's perfume. He had a single legal pad in front of him and a pen. Marco Callahan was standing where Isabella had told him to stand. Constance Callahan was drinking water. The forensic accountants had moved their laptops to the long sideboard against the wall and were typing the way people in that work type. Quickly, with no expression, with the small, efficient grace of people unmaking a man's life by spreadsheet. The whole room turned toward Isabella when she came in. She walked to the head of the table. She sat down in Roman's chair. Roman did not protest. He did not have the energy left to protest. He had not had the energy to protest for about 11 minutes. She placed her hands on the table. "All right," she said. "Where are we?" "Mrs. Sinclair," Agent Foley said. "Mr. Callahan has agreed, verbally and on the record, to the parameters of the window. We are 10 minutes into the hour. His attorney, Mr. Cohen, has been authorized to come upstairs at our request. I'd like to do that now." "Yes. With your permission, ma'am, I'd like to begin the written portion of the agreement here, at this table, before we move." "Yes." "Mr. Callahan has also indicated, in the last 3 minutes, a willingness to provide information about parties outside his immediate family, including parties at, and I'm being careful with my language here, at jurisdictional levels above the family, federal level, political level, law enforcement level." The dining room went still in the small particular way it had gone still 7 times already that night. "Above the family," Isabella said. "Yes, ma'am." "Names." "Ma'am, that's not for this room." "Names, Agent Foley." "Ma'am, I am the only reason you are sitting in that chair tonight, Agent. Names." A long pause. Then Foley looked for the first time at Charles. Not for permission, for confirmation that he could speak in front of the room. Charles nodded once. Foley turned back to Isabella. "3 names tonight," Foley said, quietly. 2 state level, 1 federal level. The federal level name is a sitting United States attorney in an adjacent district. The state level names are a senior member of the New York State Senate and the deputy commissioner of a city agency that processes construction permits. Construction permits. "Yes, ma'am." "A senior state senator." "Yes, ma'am." "A sitting U.S. attorney." "Yes, ma'am." She did not move. She had been, in the moments before walking back into this room, the wife of a mafia boss who had ordered her to pour wine. She was, in this moment, a different kind of person. The room had begun to understand it. Lou Petrosino had understood it 20 minutes ago. Marco had understood it 10 minutes ago. Constance had understood it 5 minutes ago. Foley had been told to understand it 9 months ago. Roman, sitting in front of her, was understanding it for the first time. "Roman," she said. He looked up. His eyes were not focused. "Roman, the names you are giving the agent tonight." "Bella." "The names, Roman, the senator, the U.S. attorney, the permits man. Are those names yours or are they Marco's?" The room did a thing she had not anticipated. Marco's head came up fast. "Bella," Marco said. "Marco, be quiet." "Bella, you don't—" "Marco, be quiet." He shut up. But the look on Marco's face, the small, fast, ugly look that had crossed his face when she said the names, told her what she had begun, in the last 40 seconds, to suspect. Roman did not have those names. Roman had never been the man with those names. Roman was the muscle, the face, the noise, the brother who ran the docks and broke the hands and washed the blood off in the kitchen sink. Roman was the brother whose phone the federal text had arrived on. But the senator, the permits, the U.S. attorney, those were Marco's. Marco, who had been doing the math at the dinner table all night. Marco, who had switched sides at the second folder. Marco, who had stepped half a pace behind her chair at the third folder, like a man taking up a new seat. Marco, who had thought, with the confidence of a 34-year-old who had never been told no by his older brother, that he was going to walk out of this apartment tonight as the new acting head of a family, with his older brother flipping to the feds and taking the heat for everything Marco had ever done. Marco had thought that. And Marco, Isabella could see it on his face now, in the second after she had said his name, was beginning to understand that he had thought wrong. "Roman," she said, still looking at Marco. "Answer me." Bella. Roman, the names. Roman's eyes, slowly, focused. He looked at his little brother, Marco, who was standing 4 feet from him, who had been standing behind Isabella's chair, met his eyes. A whole conversation happened between them in about a second and a half. The conversation was older than tonight. The conversation was older than the marriage. The conversation went back to a kitchen in Bensonhurst and 2 boys at a table with their mother behind them and a father who had not yet died. The conversation, in the version of itself that happened in Isabella's dining room, said, "You set me up. You let me run the docks and the bodies, and you ran the politicians and the permits, and the indictment is on me because the warehouse is on me. And tonight you were going to let me take all 23 counts to Florence ADX, and you were going to take over the family before my body was cold. And you came to my dinner tonight in my house, and you sat at my table, and you watched me bleed." Marco did not look away. Marco never looked away. Marco had been the math kid since he was 6, but Marco's jaw, very slightly, tightened. And Roman, who had been broken in this room 6 different ways already tonight, who had nothing left of himself, who had bled into his cuff and into the linen and into the Brunello. Roman, looking at his little brother, sat up in his chair. Not all the way, but some way. "Agent Foley," Roman said. His voice was hoarse, but it was no longer cracking. "Yes, sir." "The senator, the U.S. attorney, the permits man. I have those names, but I'm not the only person at this table who has those names." Foley's pen moved. Marco took 1 step backward. Lou Petrosino's hand, the one that had been on Roman's shoulder holding him in the chair, lifted. Lou's other hand was no longer in his lap. Lou's other hand had moved very calmly, very slowly, to the back of Marco's nearest chair, not threatening, just placed. "Mr. Callahan," Foley said, "I'm going to ask you to say what you just said again, with names, with specificity, on the record." Foley: "Yes, sir." "My brother." Mr. Callahan: "My brother, Foley. My little brother. Marco Joseph Callahan. The senator is his. The U.S. attorney is his. The permits man is his. He has been moving paper through that office for 6 years. I run the docks. He runs the building. The warehouse in Maspeth. That warehouse. That whole operation. That wasn't even on me until 18 months ago. He brought that to me. He brought it to me because his guy in the state senate needed a discreet location for some specific kind of cargo. And I said yes. I said yes because he's my brother, and because I'm the older one, and because I'm the one with the docks, and because I... Roman's voice broke. Not theatrical, just broke. "I said yes, Bella," he said. He was looking at her now, not at Foley. "I said yes because he's my brother, and I'm not going to sit here and let him walk out of your apartment in my coat." Marco moved. He moved fast. He moved the way men in his family moved when they had decided, finally, that they were not going to be sitting at the table when the next sentence ended. He moved toward the foyer. Lou Petrosino was 40 pounds heavier than Marco and 20 years older, but Lou Petrosino had been doing this work since Marco was in diapers. And Lou's hand came off the chair back and caught Marco at the elbow before Marco had finished his second step. And Lou's other hand came around and caught Marco at the throat, not crushing, just holding, the way an old farmer holds a young dog. And Lou said into Marco's ear quietly, "Sit down, kid." Marco sat down. Marco sat down because he was 34 years old and Lou Petrosino had taught him how to drive. "Agent Foley," Isabella said, calm, even. "Yes, ma'am." "You're going to need a second window." "Yes, ma'am, I am." "You're going to need a second car downstairs." "Yes, ma'am." "You're going to need to call your office and tell them that in addition to Mr. Roman Callahan, you will be transporting tonight Mr. Marco Joseph Callahan on charges to be specified, with proffer to follow." "Yes, ma'am. Doing that now." He took out his phone. He did not stand. He did not leave the room. He dialed quietly, the way a man dials a number he knows by heart, and he spoke for 40 seconds in the kind of low federal monotone that exists in every field office in every city in the country. Marco sat in his chair. His eyes were on Roman. Roman's eyes were on his hands. Constance Callahan, sitting at the middle of the table, between her 2 sons, looking at neither of them, said very quietly to the room, "I want both of them to call me once a week, from wherever they are, for the rest of my life. She said it the way a woman dictates an obituary. Foley got off the phone. Mrs. Sinclair, Cohen is coming up. Second car is 12 minutes out. We can move both subjects in approximately 25 minutes. Thank you, Agent. Ma'am? One more thing. Yes, ma'am. She looked finally at Roman. He was a different man than he had been at 6:45. He was not better. He was not, in any sense she had words for, redeemed. He had not, by giving up his brother, become a person she was going to love again. The thing inside her that had loved him had been killed weeks ago, possibly months ago, possibly the night of the Met Gala, when he had squeezed her arm hard enough to leave 4 marks she had covered with foundation for 6 days. But he was a different man. He was a man who, in the last 15 minutes, had given a federal agent the names of 3 of the most protected men in the state of New York, had given up his own brother, had agreed to spend the rest of his natural life in a federal cooperator's existence, which is to say, in a small apartment in a city he would never be allowed to name, with a guard outside the door, under a name that was not his. He was a man who had, somewhere in there, finally understood what his wife had been doing for 19 months. He looked up. Bella. Yes, Roman. For the record. For whatever this room is. For the record. Yes. I am sorry. Don't, Roman. Bella, I am sorry. I am sorry for the wine. I am sorry for the woman. I am sorry for the Met Gala. I am sorry for the necklace. I am sorry for Bracco. I am sorry I did not know who you were. I am sorry I never asked. She looked at him. She looked at him for what was probably 4 seconds and felt like a year. Then she said, in the calm, even voice she had used all evening, Roman, I accept that. I accept that you are sorry. I want you to understand something, and I want you to carry it with you in the small room they put you in tonight for the rest of your life. I do not forgive you. I am not going to forgive you. I am not capable of it. Forgiveness is a thing I do not have for you, and that I do not have an obligation to manufacture. What I have for you, instead, is the following. I will not testify against you. I will not call you. I will not visit you. I will not write you. I will, through Charles, ensure that your mother is taken care of for the remainder of her life. I will, through Charles, ensure that Mr. Cohen is paid until the end of the cooperation period. I will not, in any interview, in any deposition, in any book, in any film, in any conversation with any friend, ever speak your name again. You are, as of midnight tonight, a closed chapter in a book I am writing about a different woman. Do you understand me? Yes, Bella. Good. Bella? What? Thank you. She did not answer. She stood up from his chair. She walked, the last time she would ever walk it, to the foot of the table where she had been seated all evening. She reached down. She picked up, from beside the dinner plate that had cold risotto on it, the small folded piece of paper that Charles had handed her 2 hours earlier, with the consolidated net asset value written on it in his small, even hand. She put the paper in the pocket of her dress. She turned. She faced the room. Charles. Yes. Begin the transfer of the building. Charles, who had been waiting 2 hours for that sentence, nodded once to the lead forensic accountant. The accountant's fingers moved on his keyboard. In a server farm in Northern Virginia, a sequence of approvals routed through 11 offshore entities and resolved at 10:03 on a Friday night in November into a single line of new ownership on a private deed. The penthouse, the building it was in, the air rights above it, the parking garage below it, and the small alley to the east of it, every square foot of which Roman Callahan had spent the last 3 years calling his, became, with a sound no louder than a soft keystroke, the property of a Delaware trust that resolved, 6 holding companies deep, to a woman in a navy dress standing at the foot of a dining table. The elevator chimed. Mr. Cohen, the attorney Isabella had retained at 3 that afternoon, stepped out. Behind him, 2 more federal agents. Behind them, a third. And behind the third, somewhere out in the hallway, somewhere just past the line of Isabella's vision, the sound of a man's footsteps she had not been expecting. Heavy, slow, deliberate. and a voice low, with the kind of long East Coast vowels she had not heard inside her own apartment in a very long time, saying to one of the agents, in the tone of a man who had been waiting his entire career to be allowed into this particular foyer, "Evening, son. Tell Mrs. Sinclair her uncle is—" "Evening, son. Tell Mrs. Sinclair her uncle is here." The voice came from the hallway like a stone dropped into still water, and every person in the dining room turned their head toward the foyer at the same time. Isabella did not turn. She did not need to. She had not seen the man who owned that voice in 17 years. Her hand, which had been at her side, went to the back of the dining chair at the foot of the table. Not to steady herself, she was steady. She had been steady all night. But because her body needed to touch something solid in the precise second that her past walked into her foyer. The footsteps came down the hall. Slow, even, heavy. The footsteps of a large man who had spent his life moving carefully through other people's rooms. He stepped into the dining room. Edward Sinclair was 64 years old. He was her father's younger brother. He had been disinherited, completely and publicly, by William Sinclair in the spring of 1998, when Isabella was 3.5, for reasons that had been the unanswered question of her adolescence and the closed door of her adulthood. He had not been at her grandfather's funeral. He had not been at her wedding. He had not, to her knowledge, set foot in the state of New York since the year she had graduated from college. He was wearing a dark gray topcoat, slightly damp at the shoulders. His hair was white. His face, which had been handsome once in the photograph she had as a child, had thickened around the jaw and softened around the eyes. He carried in his right hand a small leather portfolio. Not a briefcase. A portfolio. The kind a man carries when there is exactly one document inside. He stopped 2 steps inside the dining room. He looked at Isabella. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "Hello, sweetheart." She did not answer. She could not answer. Charles Whitaker, against the wall, had gone very still. Charles's face, for the second time in 2 hours, had done a thing she had never seen it do. The dry, careful man she had known her entire life looked, in this moment, like a man who had been ambushed. "Charles," Edward Sinclair said, without turning his head. "Edward, you knew I was coming. I knew you were on a plane. I did not know you would be in this building tonight. Well, here I am." Agent Foley stood up. "Sir, I'm going to need to know who you are." "Easy, son. Edward Sinclair. I'm the girl's uncle. I've already shown my identification to your colleague in the hallway. He let me through." Foley looked at one of the agents who had come up with Cohen. The agent nodded once. Foley sat back down, slowly. Edward Sinclair walked the length of the dining room. He moved past Roman, past Marco, past Lou Petrosino, past Constance Callahan, past the forensic accountants at the sideboard, without looking at any of them. He walked to where Isabella stood at the foot of the table. He stopped 4 feet from her. He did not try to embrace her. He did not try to take her hand. He had, somewhere in the 17 years between, learned what kind of woman she had become. He set the leather portfolio on the table between them. He said, "I'm not staying. I'm not asking to stay. I'm here for 1 minute. I'm here because Charles called me 6 hours ago and told me what was about to happen in this room tonight. And I told him I'd be on the next plane out of Lisbon. And I was." She found her voice. It was smaller than she had expected. "Charles called you?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because of what's in the portfolio." She looked at Charles. Charles, against the wall, met her eyes. He did not look away. He said, in the careful, even voice she had known her whole life, "I told you, in the study, that there was a 4th folder. I told you it was about your father. You told me to burn it. I will burn it tonight, exactly as you instructed. But your uncle, Isabella, your uncle is not in the 4th folder. Your uncle is the 4th folder. I called him 6 hours ago because I made a calculation, and I will own that calculation in front of you, that if you ever changed your mind in the future about wanting to know what really happened to your father, the only person alive who could tell you the whole of it, in his own voice, is the man standing in front of you. I called him because he is 64 years old, and he has emphysema, and he will not be alive in 5 years. And I made the choice to put him on a plane while there was still a plane to put him on. I will accept any consequence you assign to that choice." The room was very quiet. Isabella did not look at Charles. She kept her eyes on her uncle. Edward. Yes? What is in the portfolio? A letter from your father to you, written 6 days before he died, sealed, never opened. I have kept it in a vault in Geneva for 27 years. She looked down at the leather portfolio. It was the color of old wine. She did not reach for it. Why, she said. Why what, sweetheart? Why are you bringing it to me tonight? Because Charles told me what kind of night you were having. And I thought maybe, after tonight, you would have the room in your chest to hold what's in this letter. I have been waiting 27 years for the night when you would have the room. I would have been wrong to wait any longer. Edward. Yes. Why did my grandfather disinherit you? He smiled. It was a small, tired, honest smile. The smile of a man who had been asked the question he had spent his whole life preparing to answer. Because I told him the truth, he said. What truth? That your father, my older brother, the one who was going to inherit everything, the one your grandfather loved, Isabella, the one your grandfather loved more than any other living thing on this earth, was not the man your grandfather thought he was. Your father had a temper, sweetheart. He had a very bad temper. He had a very bad temper, and he had a wife, your mother, and there were nights. I am not going to give you details. You do not need details. But there were nights, Isabella, when I drove to East Hampton at 2 in the morning because your mother had called me from a bathroom. I told your grandfather. I told him at a table in his office. I told him in May of 1997. And your grandfather, who loved your father more than any other living thing on this earth, looked at me across that table and he asked me if I had any proof. And I said no. And he asked me if I would say what I had just said in front of your father. And I said yes. And we sat your father down the next day in that same office. And I said it again. And your father denied it. And your grandfather, sweetheart, who could read a balance sheet better than any man in the city of New York, chose to believe your father. And he asked me to leave the business. And I left. And I went to Lisbon. And 11 months later, your father was killed in a house on Gin Lane. And your grandfather, who had chosen the wrong son to believe, spent the next 23 years of his life trying to make it right with the only piece of your father he had left, which was you. The room did not breathe. Isabella did not breathe. Your mother, Edward said, softer. Your mother, Isabella, did not die of cancer when you were 7. That part is true. That part really did happen, but she had not been well, sweetheart, for a long time before the diagnosis. And the reason she had not been well is the same reason I drove to East Hampton at 2 in the morning more than once. I'm telling you these things because Charles told me what kind of marriage you have been in. And I want you to know, Isabella, with whatever room is left in your chest tonight, that there is a pattern in our family, on your father's side, that did not start with the man you married. It started with my brother. And I tried, 28 years ago, to stop it before it ever touched you. And I failed. And I have spent 27 years in another country thinking about how I failed. And tonight, sweetheart, watching what you did in this room, Charles described it to me on the phone an hour ago. Tonight, finally, I get to stop being a man who failed. Because tonight you finished what I started. By yourself. Without me. Without a single person in this room helping you, except an old lawyer who loved your grandfather. You finished it. You broke the pattern. And I came to tell you that, and to give you this letter, and to get back on a plane, because I am not staying in your life, Isabella. I gave that up the day I lost the argument in your grandfather's office. I am only here to put the letter in your hand. But, He stepped back. He stepped back 2 steps. The respectful distance of a man who had said what he came to say. Isabella stood at the foot of the table with 12 people watching her. She picked up the leather portfolio. She did not open it. She turned it over in her hands once, slowly, feeling the weight. The portfolio weighed, all told, perhaps 3 ounces. The weight of a single folded letter and a single sealed envelope. She put the portfolio inside her dress at the hip, where her phone had been, where Charles's small folded paper with the consolidated number had been. The dress had been made by an old woman in Milan who understood that women needed pockets that could not be seen. She looked up at her uncle. Edward. Yes. Thank you. He nodded. He nodded the way old men nod when the only thing left between them and a younger person is the long quiet of accepted history. "I'll see myself out," he said. He turned. He walked the length of her dining room the way he had walked into it. He passed Roman Callahan without looking at him. He passed Marco without looking at him. At the threshold of the foyer, he paused. He turned slightly, just his head, just enough. "Sweetheart," he said. "Yes, Edward. Your father loved you. The letter will tell you so. The letter will tell you that, and not very much else, because he did not know, when he wrote it, that he was going to die 6 days later. He thought he was writing it for a birthday. He wrote it for your 5th birthday. He never gave it to you because he never made it to your 5th birthday. But he loved you, Isabella. Whatever else was true of him, that part was true. I wanted to say it in this room, in front of these people, because I will not be in any other room with you to say it." He walked out. She did not watch him leave. She heard the elevator chime. She heard the doors close. She heard the cable in the shaft begin to lower him toward the street. Then she turned back to the room. The room had not moved. Agent Foley had set his pen down. He picked it back up. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, quietly. "When you are ready." "I am ready, Agent." "Yes, ma'am. Yes." The next 2 hours happened the way long official nights happen. Cohen signed papers with Roman in the corner of the dining room. The forensic accountants closed their laptops one at a time. Foley walked Marco through a separate, smaller document in a separate, quieter voice. Constance Callahan, at some point, was helped to her feet by Lou Petrosino and walked to the foyer and put into a car. She did not say goodbye to Isabella. There was no version of the next 20 years in which Constance Callahan and Isabella Sinclair were going to know each other, and they both understood this. And there was no need for either of them to dress the understanding up in words. At 12 minutes past midnight, Roman Callahan was walked out of his own apartment, the apartment he no longer owned, in a coat that was not his, between 2 federal agents, in handcuffs that were polite but real. He was not paraded. He was not photographed. The deal his wife had bought him, with her own money, this afternoon, had included a private exit through the service elevator and a parking garage 2 blocks away where a quiet car was waiting. At the door of the foyer, he stopped. He turned, the small turn of a man whose hands were behind his back. He looked at Isabella across her own dining room. He did not say anything. He had said what he had said. He had said it in front of Foley, and in front of Cohen, and in front of his mother, and in front of his brother, and in front of Lou, and it had not earned him forgiveness. He understood finally, in that turn, that there was nothing left for him to say. He just looked. She looked back. She did not nod. She did not smile. She did not lift a hand. She just held his eyes for the 1.5 it took for the federal agent on his left to gently turn him by the elbow, the way a nurse turns a patient, and walk him out the door. The door closed. The latch clicked. Marco Callahan was walked out 12 minutes later. There was no goodbye. Marco did not look at her. Marco had already, in his head, started his own arithmetic, which was the arithmetic of how he was going to survive the next 40 years. Marco would survive. Marco had always survived. But the version of Marco that walked out of her apartment at 12:31 in the morning was not the version of Marco who had stepped behind her chair 3 hours earlier, expecting a promotion. Lou Petrosino stayed. Lou stayed because at some point in the last hour, in a quiet exchange Isabella had not even heard, he had become her employee. He stayed and he helped the building staff and the federal agents close the apartment down for the night. He walked the forensic accountants to the elevator with their cases. He locked the service door. He turned off the lamps in the foyer one by one. He came back to the dining room and stood, quietly, at a respectful distance. The dining room, at 1:14 in the morning, was empty except for Isabella and Charles and Lou and the wreckage on the table. The candles had burned down to stubs. The risotto had congealed into a yellow film. The spilled Brunello had dried into a stain in the shape of New Jersey on the tablecloth. The broken stem of Vanessa Beaumont's wine glass was still on the floor by the leg of Roman's chair. Isabella sat down finally at the foot of the table. She put her hands flat on the wood. For the first time in 7 hours, she let her shoulders down. "Charles?" "Yes, Isabella." "Sit." He sat. He sat in the chair that had been Edmund Halverson III's 8 hours ago. "Lou?" "Yes, ma'am." "Sit." Lou sat. He sat with the carefulness of a man who had spent 30 years sitting in chairs that belonged to other men and had finally been invited to sit in a chair that belonged to him. The three of them sat at the table. For about a minute, nobody spoke. Then Isabella said, "Charles?" "Yes." "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., my office, you and me, we start the work." "Yes." "Lou." "Ma'am." "You're with me. Starting tonight. Salary to be discussed in the morning. There will be a number, and the number will be fair, and the number will be the last raise you ever need to negotiate." "Yes, ma'am." "There is, somewhere in this apartment, a Patek Philippe. It was Roman's. It is technically mine now, in the way that everything in this apartment is now mine. I want it boxed. I want it taken to a vault. I do not want to see it again. I do not want it sold. I do not want it melted. I want it in a box, in a vault, indefinitely. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "And Lou?" "Yes, ma'am." "The same goes in the safe in the master closet, behind the Hermes box, for a Tiffany necklace. Yellow diamonds. Same instruction." "Yes, ma'am." "Charles?" "Yes." "The fourth folder." A pause. "It will burn in my fireplace at 3 this morning, Isabella. I will photograph the process. You will have the photographs at 9. "Good." "Isabella?" "Yes." "The letter?" "Yes." "From your uncle?" "Yes, Charles." He looked at her. "You don't have to open it tonight, sweetheart." It was the first time in 22 years he had called her sweetheart. It was the same word her uncle had used. She did not know if Charles had picked it up from him, or if both old men had been holding the same word in reserve for the same eventual evening. "I know I don't, Charles," she said. "You don't have to open it ever." "I know that too. I have kept secrets for you, Isabella. I have kept them badly, and I have kept them well. The one I kept tonight was the worst of them, and I will carry the cost of it for the rest of my life. If you tell me in the morning that you no longer want me to work for you, I will accept that decision, and I will hand the firm to whomever you name, and I will go quietly. I want you to know that you have that option. Tonight, tomorrow, 6 months from now. Whenever you decide." She looked at him. He had aged 10 years in the last 7 hours. "Charles?" "Yes." "I am not going to fire you." His shoulders very slightly came down. "I am not going to fire you because my grandfather did not raise me to fire people who told me the truth on the worst night of their lives. I am not going to fire you because you bought me an entire infrastructure of survival without my permission, and I am angry about it, and I will be angry about it for some time, and I will still need you next Tuesday at 9. I am not going to fire you because there are about 11 other people on this earth I trust, and you are 5 of them. We will work it out, Charles. Not tonight, but we will." He nodded. He did not say thank you. He had been her grandfather's man for too long to say thank you for being kept. He just nodded. The three of them sat for another minute at the rec table. Then Isabella stood up. "I'm going to walk to the window," she said. "Both of you go home. Lou, there is a guest room down the hall and to the right. Use it. I do not want to be alone in this building tonight, but I also do not want to talk to a human being for any more minutes than I have already talked to one. Sleep here. We start at 8. "Yes, ma'am." "Charles, go home. Burn what you said you would burn. Be at my office at 9. "Yes, Isabella." "Good night." "Good night, Isabella." She walked alone down the long hallway of the apartment that had become hers somewhere around 10 that night, past the framed black and white photographs of nothing in particular, past the door to the study where she had learned 2 hours earlier that her father had died in a different way than she had been told, past at the door to the master bedroom she had not yet decided whether she would ever sleep in again. She walked into the living room, the big living room, the one with the wall of windows that face south down the Hudson, toward the harbor, toward the bridges, toward the dark, wet city. She walked to the glass. She put her palm flat against the window. The window was cold. She breathed. She breathed. She breathed. After a long time, she took the leather portfolio out of the pocket of her dress. She sat down on the rug in front of the window. She unzipped the portfolio. There was inside a single sealed envelope. The envelope was old. The paper was the heavy cream paper of a different decade. The envelope had her name on it, in ink that had gone slightly brown with age. Isabella Marie. Just her first and middle name. Her father had not gotten around to her last name yet because, on her 5th birthday, He had not thought he would need to remind her of it. She slid her thumb under the flap of the envelope. It opened easily. The paper inside was thin, onion skin, the way old letters used to be. Her father had written in a small, careful hand. She read the letter. She read it twice. She read it a third time. It was, as her uncle had said, a birthday letter for a 5-year-old. It was a list. It was a list of things her father wanted to tell her about herself. He thought she was funny. He thought she was brave. He thought she was, at 4, more curious about the world than her grandfather had been at 60. And he wanted her to know that this was a good thing, that he was proud of it, and that whatever the world did to her over the next 80 years, she should not let anyone, including her grandfather, including him, including the man she eventually loved, take that curiosity away from her. He wrote that he loved her mother. He wrote that he was working on being a better husband. He wrote, and this was the line that made Isabella sit very still on the rug, "I have not always been the man I want to be, sweetheart, but you, my Isabella, are the reason I am trying." He had signed it with his first name, just William, as if she were already old enough to call him that. She folded the letter. She put it back in the envelope. She put the envelope back in the portfolio. She put the portfolio on the rug beside her. She sat there, on the floor of her own living room, in a navy dress, in a building she now owned, in a city she now, in some quiet way, also owned, and she let her face do, finally, what she had not let it do all night. She did not cry. She had not cried since she was 19, and she did not start now. The thing in her that knew how to cry had been put down too long ago, to be picked up on the same night a federal agent had walked her husband out of her foyer. But her face did something close. Her face softened. Her face softened in the way the faces of much older women soften when they finally allow themselves, after a long day, to be alone in a quiet room. Her mouth came open, just slightly. Her shoulders came all the way down. The small muscle between her eyebrows, which had been tight since 6:45 in the evening, unclenched. She put her hands in her lap, palms up, open. She breathed. She breathed. She breathed. Outside, the city did what the city always did at 2 in the morning. The cabs went by. A garbage truck started its slow grinding climb up 10th Avenue. A boat, somewhere out on the river, sounded its low foghorn once, the way boats do in November when they cannot see the bridge. The rain that had been falling all night had finally thinned out into a fine, cold mist that softened the lights of the buildings across the river into halos. Isabella sat on the rug for a long time. She thought about her father, who had loved her, and who had also been the kind of man who made her uncle drive to East Hampton at 2 in the morning. She thought about her mother, who had not died of cancer, not really. Not the way you die of cancer when you have been well first. She thought about her grandfather, who had chosen the wrong son in 1997, and who had spent 23 years trying to make it right with her, and who had, in the end, mostly succeeded. She thought about Charles, who had loved her grandfather, and who had loved her and who had also gone around her, and who would be at her office at 9. She thought about Roman, who was, in this minute, lying in a federal bed in a midtown hotel under a name that was not his, looking at a ceiling. She thought about Marco, in a different bed in a different room. She thought about Constance, alone in her apartment in Bay Ridge, drinking water at a kitchen table. She thought about Vanessa Beaumont, who would be on the train to her mother's house in Pennsylvania by tomorrow afternoon. She thought about her uncle, who was by now somewhere over the Atlantic, going home to Lisbon, where the air was easier on his lungs. She thought about all of them, and she did not love most of them. And the ones she loved she did not love simply, and the ones she did not love she did not hate. And she understood, sitting on the rug at 2 in the morning, that this was what her grandfather had been trying to teach her every Sunday morning over black coffee and newspapers, for the entire first 18 years of her life. He had not been trying to teach her how to be powerful. He had been trying to teach her how to be alone, how to sit in a room at the end of a long night, with no one to applaud her, with no one to forgive her, with no one to hold her, and still be, quietly, exactly, without performance, the woman she had decided to be. She got up off the rug. She picked up the portfolio. She walked, in bare feet now, the heels left somewhere in the hallway hours ago, to the small safe behind the painting in the corner of the living room. She opened the safe. She placed the portfolio inside. She closed the safe. She turned the dial. She walked to the window one more time. She put her forehead, finally, against the glass. The glass was cold. She smiled. It was a small smile, a tired smile. A smile no one but the dark river and the rain and the foghorns saw. But it was a real smile, and it was the first smile that had been on her face since 6:45 the previous evening, and it stayed there for about 4 seconds. Then she straightened. She turned off the lamp. She walked, in the dark, down the hallway of the apartment she now owned, toward the guest room at the end where she had decided, without ceremony, she would sleep tonight, because she was not yet ready to lie down in the bed she had shared with the man she had buried this evening without a shovel. She passed the dining room on the way. She paused at the threshold. The candles had finally gone out. The table was still wrecked. The stain in the shape of New Jersey was still on the linen. The broken stem of the wine glass was still on the floor. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she walked on. She did not close the door. She did not need to close the door. There was no one left in the apartment, except Lou Petrosino sleeping in the second guest room down the hall, who would be coming into that dining room tomorrow at 8 in the morning to start clearing it. She walked to the guest room. She did not turn on the light. She unzipped the navy dress at the side. The dress fell to the floor. She left it there. She would have it taken away tomorrow. She would never wear it again. It would be donated anonymously in a black bag to a thrift store in Queens, where 8 months later, a young secretary named Maya would find it on the rack, pay $16 for it, take it home, hem it 3 inches at the bottom, and wear it to her first job interview in a Wall Street firm she would eventually run. But Isabella would never know any of that. Isabella, at 2:17 in the morning, climbed into the guest bed in a white slip. The sheets were cold. She did not warm them up. She lay on her back. She looked at the dark ceiling. She thought, the last thought before sleep, I am 31 years old. I own a building. I own a city block. I own, through 11 holding companies, a meaningful piece of a country. I have no husband. I have no children. I have an old lawyer and an old soldier and a dead grandfather and a father I never knew and a mother I barely remember and an uncle on a plane and a letter in a safe. And tomorrow morning at 9, I begin. She closed her eyes. She slept. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The city, which had not known and would never know what had happened on the 42nd floor of a building on the Hudson between the hours of 6:45 p.m. on a Friday and 2:17 a.m. on a Saturday, kept going. Somewhere east of the river, in a hotel room under a name that was not his, Roman Callahan stared at a ceiling he did not own anymore and understood, for the first time in his adult life, what it cost to mistake a quiet woman for a weak one. He understood it because she had let him live to understand it. That, in the end, was the only mercy she ever showed him, and it was the only mercy he ever deserved.